This is Ahsoka Tano, a powerful Force user who left the Jedi Order behind to walk her own path. And like everything in Star Wars, her story is complicated. But fear not, because this is the Ahsoka Tano timeline explained. Welcome back to Explainiac, I'm Dan Casey, and today we're accessing the world between worlds to look at the past, present, and future of Ahsoka Tano, everyone's favorite Jedi who's no longer a Jedi. She's getting her own 8-episode Disney Plus series this August. She first appeared on August 8th, 2008 in Star Wars The Clone Wars, not the animated series, but the ill-loved Clone Wars animated movie. Created by Dave Filoni, Ahsoka played a major role during the Clone Wars, and she really helped lend a much deeper texture to that story in the prequel trilogy in hindsight. As Dave Filoni himself summarized in a recent video, this young teenage girl who was trained to be a keeper of the peace had to become a warrior worthy of standing next to the greatest Jedi of all time. And that's exactly what happened. She was a crucial player during the birth of the Rebel Alliance, and now she's poised to go up against Grand Admiral Thrawn in the New Republic era as well. In her earliest conceptions, Ahsoka was intended to be just this random Padawan apprentice to a brand new Jedi we hadn't met. However, thanks to a timely suggestion by George Lucas, you know, the guy that made Star Wars?
Again, it's like poetry, so if they rhyme.
She became Anakin Skywalker's apprentice instead, and the rest, as they say, is space history. But given how daunting the galaxy far, far away's timeline can be, we want to make sure we're all on the same page of the sacred texts. Excuse me, the sacred texts! As we head into Ahsoka. So with the help of Nerdist Chief Librarian of the Jedi Archives, Amy Ratcliffe, we've assembled a timeline of the life and times of Ahsoka Tano. And while it covers most major events, it's not exhaustive, so please feel free to fill in the gaps in the comments below. Now, obviously, to talk about this stuff, we have to spoil a metric ton of Star Wars stories, including the Clone Wars, Rebels, the Mandalorian, the Holiday Special, Chappie 2, anything could be on the table here. So if you're worried about that sort of thing, make like Ezra Bridger and get lost, buddy. Now, a quick note before we get started. While Lucasfilm has not said anything one way or the other, we're going to be ignoring certain events of E.K. Johnston's 2016 Ahsoka novel because the events of that book have seemingly been contradicted and retconned by Tales of the Jedi. So when in doubt, we will be deferring to that series instead, and hey, you know what? The events of that book still could have happened from a certain point of view.
A certain point of view?
Now, our story begins a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. I know, gasp you should. Specifically in the year 36 BBY, or before the Battle of Yavin, if you're nasty. Now, for those who don't know, Star Wars' timeline hinges on the Battle of Yavin. It culminates in the destruction of the Death Star in A New Hope. Hence, you have BBY before the Battle of Yavin and ABY after the Battle of Yavin. Get it? Great. Let's move on. As I was saying, in 36 BBY, Ahsoka Tano was born on the Togrutan homeworld of Shili. That makes her roughly 5 years younger than Anakin Skywalker and Grogu, who are the same age, kind of like Ted Cruz and Gwen Stefani. From an early age, Ahsoka exhibited some unusual abilities. For example, she once rescued her mom from a ferocious creature known as a Rakshir. But rather than just immediately die like I would as a child, the wee baby Ahsoka formed a connection with this creature and then rode it back to her village. This was the first manifestation of her Force sensitivity. It led her village elder to declare that Ahsoka would become a Jedi. And she was right. Sort of. 3 years later, in 33 BBY, the Jedi Master Plo Koon discovered this Togrutan tot and brought her back to Coruscant to begin her Jedi training in earnest. And though she was strong in the Force, Ahsoka was also strong in the head. She had a rebellious attitude during her Jedi training. But everything changed around Ahsoka's 14th birthday in 22 BBY. Through her brash exterior, Master Yoda saw potential. Yoda elevated Ahsoka to Padawan at age 14, a full 2 years before most younglings reached that rank. And then he placed her under the tutelage of another rebellious Jedi, namely Anakin Skywalker. And this happened shortly after the Battle of Geonosis. You know who wasn't headstrong in that battle? Jango Fett. Now, this may have seemed like an unlikely pairing at first blush, but Yoda did this specifically to teach Anakin a tough lesson about emotional attachments. If you love someone, you have to let them go, and that goes double if you don't have the high ground, buddy. Unlike most Jedi, Ahsoka's field training took place amid the pitched battles and political minefield of the Clone Wars. Ahsoka and Anakin's first mission together was on the planet Christophsis, where the Republic Army found themselves surrounded on all sides and outnumbered by Separatist forces. This was also where she first encountered Rex, a clone trooper, Anakin Skywalker second in command, and someone that would become one of Ahsoka's closest friends. Through some quick thinking and admittedly reckless tactics, Ahsoka helped Anakin take down a shield generator while Obi-Wan kidnapped the hilariously named General Worm Loathsome. Never change, Star Wars, you get Worm Loathsome, Therm Scissor Punch, Dexter Jetster, Han Solo, because he's alone when he checked in one time?
Solo.
Now, Ahsoka was taken out of the frying pan and thrown into the fire on their next major mission. It involved finding Jabba the Hutt's missing son, Rada the Hutt, who was taken captive by Separatists and then stashed away on the planet Teth. And like everything involving Jabba, it turned out to be a goddamn nightmare. It was full of double crossing, murders most foul, and that smile. That damned smile. As it turns out, Jabba's Uncle Zero was working with Count Dooku the whole time to frame the Jedi for this kidnapping. And despite saving Rada's life, Ahsoka and Anakin nearly lost theirs on Tatooine as they brought old Stinky home safe and sound. Roughly 1 year later, in 21 BBY, Ahsoka had one of the most formative experiences of her life. She died. That's not to say she's a Force ghost, though. Quite the opposite. It all began when Obi-Wan, Anakin, and Ahsoka followed a 2,000-year-old distress call to the mysterious planet of Mortis. Now, once they were there, they encountered three mysterious beings: the Father, the Son, and the Daughter, also known as the Mortis Gods. These creatures represented different aspects of the Force. The Son is the dark side, the Daughter's the light side, and the Father represents balance. Now, that balance was thrown into question when Ahsoka encountered her future self. She warned that Anakin's slow descent into the dark side would ultimately corrupt her as well. It foreshadowed some of the space-time hijinks to come with the World Between Worlds, and potentially in the Ahsoka series if some Beskar foil hat theories are to be believed. Speaking of the dark side though, the Son decided the best way to coax Anakin over to the dark side was by murdering Ahsoka. Fortunately for our heroes, we got some literal Deus Ex Machina when the daughter sacrificed herself to save Ahsoka's life. This is also presumably what created the deep-seated bond between Ahsoka and Morai, her convor companion that would watch over her in the years to come. Now, after some more metaphysical family drama, Ahsoka, Anakin, and Obi-Wan managed to make their way off-world, but they discovered they couldn't remember anything that had happened. Gas leak! Now, also quick fun fact, we almost got cameos from Darth Revan and Darth Bane in the finale of this 3-part episode arc. But sadly, we'll have to settle for replaying KOTOR instead, or, that remake that's definitely coming. It's on the way. It'll be there soon. It's coming. Moving on to the year 20 BBY, Ahsoka met a host of familiar faces. While avoiding Trandoshan bounty hunters in the jungles of Island 4, Ahsoka met everyone's favorite furry friend, Chewbacca. And did I mention that Chewbacca was in captivity and she had a bunch of younglings with her? Yeah, the magic school bus trip from hell, basically. Anyway, after freeing Chewie, the field trip from hell went from bad to worse. It culminated in Ahsoka needing to force push one of the Trandoshans to their death to save herself and the kids. Now, taking a life wasn't something that Ahsoka did lightly, and it's a testament to Anakin's training that she managed to survive the encounter and get the younglings home in one piece. Well, actually, maybe that's giving Anakin too much credit considering his track record with younglings. Next up, Ahsoka learned that the only thing that Anakin hates more than sand is not finding a loophole in the Jedi Code. In an effort to combat Separatist forces on Onderon, Ahsoka accompanied Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Captain Rex to train rebels there in the fine art of guerrilla warfare. Fear may lead to anger, but in this case, terror leads to splitting the Separatist front in two. And who takes this lesson to heart above all others? That's right, Mr. Extremist himself, Saw Gerrera. He's leading the rebels alongside his sister. Unfortunately, rebellion in the galaxy far, far away comes with a high price, and in this case, Ahsoka may have helped the freedom fighters of Onderon drive out Count Dooku and the Separatists, but at the cost of Steela Gerrera's life. And the death of Saw's sister is what ultimately radicalized him, transforming Saw into one of the most paranoid, violent partisans of all that not even Luthen trusts by the time of Andor. But speaking of trigger-happy maniacs, Ahsoka faced one of the greatest challenges of her life in the following year. In 19 BBY, Ahsoka went from one of the Jedi Order's most promising new members to having her world completely turned upside down. and it all began when she was falsely accused of bombing the Jedi Temple. While Ahsoka is many things, a Chagrutin terrorist is not one of them. Ahsoka was framed for this horrifying act by one of her close friends, Barriss Offee. Barriss orchestrated this attack after coming to view the Jedi Order as a corrupt and evil organization. Facing the prospect of a death sentence at the hands of a military tribunal, Ahsoka chose to break herself out of jail and try and prove her innocence, which she ultimately did manage to do. But not before Ahsoka was once again captured, imprisoned, and expelled from the Jedi Order for her supposed crimes, and then subjected to the trial of the century. But by that point, the damage was done, and despite the Jedi Council spinning some BS about the Force working in mysterious ways and trying to offer her a promotion to Jedi Knight, this entire ordeal shattered Ahsoka's faith in the Jedi Order. In one of the most iconic and heart-wrenching moments of the Clone Wars, Ahsoka left Anakin and the Jedi Order behind to walk her own path. In the months that followed, Ahsoka remained on Coruscant, where she met the Martez sisters on level 1313. That is a key hub in the planet's criminal underworld. It would have featured prominently in George Lucas's canceled Star Wars television series Underworld, and it was the namesake of the also canceled game Star Wars 1313. So, just don't go there. It's a cursed place. Through Ahsoka's time with these scheming sisters, we get a closer look into these pockets of Coruscant's seedy underbelly and what exactly they're fomenting. Turns out, running afoul of the Pike Syndicate isn't the best idea when you've just narrowly escaped a brutal death sentence elsewhere. But thankfully, Ahsoka gets a lifeline in the form of Deus Ex Mandalore. Bo-Katan Kryze recruits her to help the Mandalorians fight back against Darth Maul, who at this point is ruling over their home planet using a puppet government. Before she could go though, Ahsoka had a final farewell with Anakin in 19 BBY. This was the first time these two had met since Ahsoka left him and the Jedi Order behind. Ahsoka had contacted Anakin and Obi-Wan to request the Republic's aid in tracking down and capturing Darth Maul on Mandalore. Obi-Wan and the Jedi Council's reluctance to give Ahsoka all the support she requested just reminded her of everything that she disliked about the Order. Thankfully though, Anakin came through. He had a solution. Divide his 501st Legion into a brand new unit, give control of that to Commander Rex, and make Ahsoka its advisor. While it was a bittersweet departure between this former master and Padawan, at least he could give her the gift of a trusted ally in the brutal battles to come in the form of Rex. He also gave her the gift of returning her lightsabers, which are now a vibrant shade of blue instead of green. More importantly though, they would cross paths again down the line in the future, but this was the last time she would see him as Anakin rather than Darth Vader. Things then took a turn for the brutal on Mandalore as Ahsoka, Bo-Katan, Rex, and their allies began to lay siege to Maul's forces so they could reclaim control of this stolen planet. Slowly but surely they pressed their advantage, and soon enough Ahsoka found herself in a duel with Darth Maul. Eventually she prevailed and even managed to capture this dastardly Dathomirian. But just as Ahsoka and company were transferring custody of Maul to the Republic aboard a Star Destroyer, she found herself suddenly surrounded by a literal army of brainwashed clone troopers with orders to turn her into a fine red mist. That's because another major event happened in 19 BBY. Order 66, Emperor Palpatine's directive to systematically hunt down and execute all of the Jedi. This was enabled in part by inhibitor chips secretly implanted in the clone troopers, who immediately turned on their former allies and murdered them in cold blood. While Ahsoka couldn't save everyone, she did manage to remove Rex's inhibitor chip just in the nick of time, freeing her dear friend from Palpatine's compulsion. Unfortunately, in the chaos that followed, Darth Maul escaped once again to presumably go scream Kenobi in the desert or whatever he does for fun. Kenobi! And thus, arguably the worst year of Ahsoka's life came to a close, because for a time it was believed that she had died in the abject horror that was Order 66. However, Ahsoka's death wasn't real, it was merely a vision that Yoda had. In fact, partly because she had severed ties with the Jedi, she managed to escape Order 66 relatively unscathed. She disappeared into the shadows. Circa 18 BBY, Ahsoka went into hiding as a farmer to elude capture on Rada, an agrarian moon on the Outer Rim. But no one expects the Sidious Inquisition, including Ahsoka. Eventually, the sixth brother, one of these elite Jedi hunters of the Inquisitors, managed to hunt her down and attack those who sheltered her. However, in the Chumbawambian mode, Ahsoka was knocked down, but she got up again, and she took the idea of "you're never gonna keep me down" quite literally. she realized that she couldn't live her life in hiding any longer. Shortly thereafter, she made contact with Senator Bail Organa, who you may know best as Princess Leia's adoptive father and one of the key members in building the Rebel Alliance, alongside Mon Mothma. Ahsoka began working with the nascent Rebel Alliance, and she also eventually defeated the Sixth Brother as well. And then she did what any one of us would do. She looted his corpse and used the Force to heal his corrupted kyber crystals in his lightsabers to turn them a bright shade of white instead of red. It'll cost you $300 at Disney. In the years that followed, Ahsoka assumed the moniker of Fulcrum, a code name that was actually originally used by Anakin Skywalker during the Clone Wars. By the year 4 BBY, and probably even earlier, she was using this name to correspond with Hera Syndulla, an expert pilot and the leader of the Spectres. They were a rebel cell fighting back against the Empire. Now, for those who don't know, the Spectres are the titular rebels in Star Wars Rebels. They're a group comprised of Hera, the Jedi Kanan Jarrus and Ezra Bridger, the towering beef castle Zeb Orrelios, the Mandalorian demolitions expert Sabine Wren, and the surly droid Chopper, who would eventually rack up over 50,000 confirmed kills. While Ahsoka was making new friends with the Spectres, she also managed to reunite with one of her actual friends, Rex, later that year. You know, a nice reprieve amid the horrors of impending galactic civil war. Just a good old family reunion, baby! And speaking of horrors, the following year, Ahsoka journeyed with Ezra and Kanan to the mysterious planet Malachor. While Yoda urged these two Jedi to find this nightmarish planet, Ahsoka actually felt drawn there by visions of Anakin she felt through the Force back in a Jedi temple on Lothal. On Malachor, they discovered an ancient Sith temple containing not only Darth Maul and some of the Inquisitors, but one of the most significant battles of Ahsoka's life, a duel with Darth Vader. This tense battle marked the first time Ahsoka had seen her former master since he went from being a wife guy to a strife guy. Yes! As their battle raged on, the temple actually locked down and Ezra and Kanan fled, leaving Ahsoka behind. And once again, it was believed that she had died. But as it turns out, Ezra actually saved her. Not present Ezra, but future Ezra. That's right, folks, 2 years later, in 1 BBY, Ezra Bridger actually accessed this specific moment in time and saved Ahsoka from certain death. He did so by venturing into the world between worlds. This extra-dimensional realm acts as a sort of nexus of space and time in the galaxy far, far away. It's an ethereal realm through which one can access various points in the past, present, and maybe the future. And it's something that's been heavily rumored to appear in the Ahsoka series. After saving Ahsoka from turning into a pile of loose robes, Ezra and Ahsoka had to flee from Emperor Palpatine. He was trying to escape, presumably to wreak havoc on the space-time continuum. Although these two were separated in the chaos that ensued, Ahsoka promised that she would see Ezra again in the future. And this was the last time we actually saw Ahsoka for a while, until she appeared again in the epilogue of Star Wars Rebels finale. According to Star Wars timelines, it takes place around 5 ABY. That means we are finally past the seminal Battle of Yavin. From BBY to ABY, BABY! Having undergone a Gandalf-like transformation, or just coming from one of P. Diddy's parties, Ahsoka, clad entirely in white, left with Sabine to search for Ezra in the unknown regions. You know, because he was yeeted into hyperspace with Admiral Thrawn by a bunch of space whales. Is it yeeted or yacht? Now, some 4 years later, in 9 ABY, Ahsoka encountered Din Djarin and the wee baby Grogu on Corvus. And there she used the Force to learn that Grogu wasn't called Baby Yoda after all, but rather, he has a name, and he's a 50-year-old baby. She also sensed that because of the wee baby Grogu's strong connection to Daddy Din Djarin, he was vulnerable to the dark side, just like a certain former master she could name. And as such, she could not train him in good faith. Ultimately, she's the one, though, that sent Din and Grogu to Tython to seek out the Seeing Stones. We all know how that went. He got captured and put in baby handcuffs. Ahsoka, you're welcome. Great work. Sorry, I just like that she's like, you should go to Tython. He definitely won't get captured. But Ahsoka wasn't just there to give us Grogu's position. She was also on the hunt for Grand Admiral Thrawn, the so-called heir to the Empire. This military genius was a major thorn in the rebellion side. He menaced Lothal and ultimately disappeared alongside Ezra. He also just so happens to be the blue meanie and the main villain at the center of the Ahsoka series. Now, also in the year 9 ABY, Ahsoka was present on the planet Ossus, where Luke Skywalker was in the process of building his definitely not doomed Jedi temple that's just perfect for a nephew who has a sickness for thickness and high-waisted pants. When Din came to Grogu's unscheduled parent-teacher conference, Ahsoka passed along an adorable suit of Mandalorian Beskar armor for Grogu, and Din had this forged specifically for the little guy. It was arguably the toughest decision of this 50-year-old baby's life. And quick side note, this all happened during an episode of the Book of Boba Fett. Do you know how much Robert Fettuccine was featured in this episode? 0! It's the best episode of the show! And he's not even in it! Why did they make that? Okay. Anyway, previously on this video, that marks the last time we would physically see Ahsoka in the Star Wars timeline. But we would hear her voice again during the Battle of Exegol in 35 ABY in The Rise of Skywalker. Remember that? It's legally a movie. During Rey's climactic battle with Mecha Palpatine in the Sith Superdome, Rey calls upon the Jedi, and we hear many iconic voices from the past. One of the voices that flows through the Force is none other than Ahsoka Tano, and it's the last time we heard from her until now. Well, at least it's the furthest along in the Star Wars timeline that we've heard from Ahsoka. I mean, who knows what the future holds? We'll find out what happened in Ahsoka's past, presumably picking up after we saw her at Luke's Academy. It's unclear how long it's been since she last saw the likes of Sabine and the Rebels crew, but the trailers make it seem like a long time. Anyway, folks, there you have it. Those are the major events in the life and times of Ahsoka Tano. A big thank you again to Amy Ratcliffe for all of her help putting this video together, and a big thank you to you for watching. For now, though, tell us, what do you think? What's your favorite Ahsoka story? What do you hope to see in the Ahsoka series? Let us know in the comments below. And remember, not everything in life can be explained, but for everything else, there's this show.